guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I am back with Mere Christianity, book 3, chapter 3 and 4. So, if you haven't subscribed already, please consider subscribing and giving me a thumbs up. So, let's get started with chapter 3. This one is called Social Morality. Chapter 3, Social Morality. The first thing to get clear about Christian morality between man and man is that in this department, Christ did not come to preach any brand new morality. The golden rule of the New Testament, do as you would be done by, is a summing up of what everyone at bottom had always known to be right. Really great moral teachers never do introduce new moralities. It is quacks and cranks who do that. As Dr. Johnson said, people need to be reminded more often than they need to be instructed. The real job of every moral teacher is to keep on bringing us back time after time to the old simple principles which we are all so anxious not to see. Like bringing a horse back and back to the fence it has refused to jump, or bringing a child back and back to the bit in its lesson that it wants to shirk. The second thing to get clear is that Christianity has not and does not profess to have a detailed political program for applying to as you would be done by to a particular society at a particular moment. It could not have. It is meant for all men at all times, and the particular program which suited one place or time would not suit another. And anyhow, that is not how Christianity works. When it tells you to feed the hungry, it does not give you lessons in cookery. When it tells you to read the scripture, it does not give you lessons in Hebrew and Greek or even English grammar. It was never intended to replace or supersede the ordinary human arts and sciences. It is rather a director which will set them all to the right jobs and a source of energy which will give them all new life if only they will put themselves at its disposal. People say the church ought to give us a lead. That is true if they mean it in the right way, but false if they mean it in the wrong way. By the church, they ought to mean the whole body of practicing Christians. And when they say that the church should give us a lead, they ought to mean that some Christians those who happen to have the right talents should be economists and statesmen, and that all economists and statesmen should be Christians, and that their whole effort in politics and economics should be directed to putting do as you would be done by into action. If that happened, and if we others were really ready to take it, then we should find the Christian solution for our own social problems pretty quickly. But of course, when they ask for a lead from the church, most people mean they want the clergy to put out a political program. That is silly. The clergy are those particular people within the whole church who have been specially trained to set aside to look after what concerns us as creatures, who are going to give life forever, and we are asking them to do a quite different job for which they have not been trained. The job is really on us, on the layman. The application of Christian principles say to trade unionism or education must come from Christian trade unionists and Christian schoolmasters, just as Christian literature comes from Christian novelists and dramatists, not from the bench of bishops getting together and trying to write plays and novels in their spare time. All the same, the New Testament, without going into details, gives us a pretty clear hint of what a fully Christian society would be like. Perhaps it gives us more than we take. It tells us that there to be no passengers or parasites. If man does not work, he ought to not eat, not to eat. Everyone is to work with his own hands, and what is more, everyone's work is to produce something good. There will be no manufacture or silly luxuries, and then of sillier advertisements to persuade us to buy them. And there is to be no swank or side, no putting on airs. To that extent, a Christian society would be what we now call leftist. On the other hand, it is always insisting in obedience and outward marks of respect from all of us to properly appointed magistrates, from children to parents, and I'm afraid this is going to be very unpopular, from wives to husbands. Thirdly, it is to be a cheerful society, full of singing and rejoicing, and regarding worry or anxiety as wrong. Courtesy is one of the Christian's virtues, and the New Testament hates what is called busybodies. If there were such a society in existence and you or I visit it, I think we should come away with a curious impression. We should feel that its economic life was very socialist and in the sense advanced, but that is family life and its code of manners were rather old-fashioned, perhaps even ceremonious and aristocratic. Each of us would like some bits of it, but I'm afraid very few of us would like the whole thing. That is just what one would expect if Christianity is the total plan for the human machine. We have all departed from the total plan in different ways, and each of us wants to make out that his own modifications of the original plan is the plan itself. You will find this again and again about anything that is really Christian. Everyone is attracted by bits of it and wants to pick out those bits and leave the rest. That is why we do not get much further. And that is why people who are fighting for quite opposite things can both say they're fighting for Christianity. Now, another point, there is one bit of advice given to us by an ancient heathen Greeks and by Jews in the Old Testament and by the great Christian teachers of the Middle Ages, which the modern economic system has completely disobeyed. All these people told us not to lend money at interest, and lending money at interest, what we call investments, is the basis of our whole system. Now, it may not absolutely follow that we are wrong. Some people say that when Moses and Aristotle and the Christians agreed in forbidding interest, or usury as they call it, they could not foresee the joint stock company and were only thinking about the private money lender, and that therefore we need no bother about what they said. That is a question I cannot decide on. I am not an economist, and I simply do not know whether the investment system is responsible for the state we are in or not. This is where we want the Christian economist, but I should not have been honest if I had not told you that 3 great civilizations had agreed, or so it seems at first sight, in condemning the very thing on which we have based our whole life. One more point and I'm done. In the passage where the New Testament says that everyone must work, it gives a reason in order that he may have something to give to those in need. Charity, giving to the poor, is an essential part of Christian morality. In the frightening parable of the sheep and the goats, it seems to be the point on which everything turns. Some people nowadays say that charity ought to be unnecessary, and that instead of giving to the poor, we ought to be producing a society in which there were no poor to give to. They may be quite right in saying that we ought to produce this kind of society. But if anyone thinks that as a consequence you can stop giving in the meantime, then he has parted company with all Christian morality. I do not believe one can settle how much we ought to give. I'm afraid the only safe rule is to give more than we can spare. In other words, if our expenditure on comforts, luxuries, amusements, etc. is up to the standard common among those with the same income as our own, we are probably giving away too little. If our charities do not at all pinch or hamper us, I should say they are too small. There ought to be things we should like to do and cannot do because our charities expenditure excludes them. I'm speaking now of charities in the common way, particular cases of distress among your own relatives, friends, neighbors, or employees, which God, as it were forced upon your notice, may demand much more, even to the crippling and endangering of your own position. For many of us, the great obstacle to charity lies not in our luxuries, living, or desire for more money, but in our fear of insecurity. This must often be recognized as a temptation. Sometimes our pride also hinders our charity. We are tempted to spend more than we ought, and on the showy forms of generosity, tipping, hospitality, and less than we ought on those who really need our help. And now, before I end, I am going to venture on a guess as to how this section has affected any who have read it. My guess is that there are some lefties, people among them, who are very angry that it has not gone further in that direction, and some people of an opposite sort who are angry because they think it has gone much too far. If so, that brings us right up against the real snag in all this drawing up of blueprints for our Christian society. Most of us are not really approaching the subject in order to find out what Christianity says. We are approaching it in the hope of finding support from Christianity for the views of our own party. We're looking for an ally where we are offered either a master or a judge. I am just the same. There are bits in this section that I wanted to leave out, and that is why nothing whatever is going to come of such talks unless we go much longer way around. A Christian society is not going to arrive until most of us really want it, and we are not going to want it until we become fully Christian. I may repeat, do as you would be done by, till I am black in the face, but I cannot really carry it out till I love my neighbor as myself. And I cannot learn to love my neighbor as myself till I learn to love God. And I cannot learn to love God except by learning to obey him. And so, I warn you, we are driven on to something more inward, driven on from social matters to religious matters, for the longest way around is the shortest way home. Okay, that's the end of chapter 3. Now we move chapter 4, morality and psychoanalysis. I have said that we should never get a Christian society unless most of us became Christian individuals. That does not mean, of course, that we can put off doing anything about society until some imaginary date in the far future. It means that we must begin both jobs at once. One, the job of seeing how do as you would be done by can be applied in detail to modern society. And two, the job of becoming the sort of people who really would apply it if we saw how. I now want to begin considering what the Christian idea of a good man is, the Christian specification for a human machine. Before I come down to details, there are two more general points I should like to make. First of all, since Christian morality claims to be a technique for putting the human machine right, I think you would like to know how it is related to another technique which seems to make a similar claim, namely psychoanalysis. Now you want to distinguish very clearly between two things, between the actual medical theories and techniques of the psychoanalysis and the general philosophical view of the world, which Freud and some others have gone on to add to this. The second thing, the philosophy of Freud is in direct contradiction to the other great psychologist, Jung. And furthermore, when Freud is talking about how to cure neurotics, he's speaking as a specialist on his own subject. But when he goes on to talk about general philosophy, he is speaking as an amateur. It is therefore quite sensible to attend to him with respect in one case and not in the other. And that is what I do. I am all the readier to do it because I have found that when he is talking off his head, of his own subject, and on a subject I do know something about, namely language, he is very ignorant. But psychoanalysis itself, apart from all the philosophical additions that Freud and others have made to it, is not the least contradictory to Christianity. Its techniques overlaps with Christian morality at some points, and it would not be a bad thing. And if every person knew something about it, but it does not run the same course all the way, for the two techniques are doing rather different things. When a man makes a moral choice, two things are involved. One is the act of choosing, the other is the various feelings, impulses, and so on, which his psychological outfit presents him with, and which are the raw materials of his choice. Now, this raw material may be of two kinds. Either it may be what we would call normal. It may consist of the sort of feelings that are common to all men, or else it may consist of quite unnatural feelings due to things that have gone wrong in his subconscious. Thus, fear of things that are really dangerous would be example of the first kind, and irrational fear of cats or spiders would be an example of the second kind. The desire of a man for a woman would be the first kind. The perverted desire of a man or a woman, the perverted desire of a man for a man would be of the second. Now, what psychoanalysis undertakes to do it to remove abnormal feelings, that is, to give the man better raw material for his acts of choice. Morality is concerned with the acts of choice themselves. But put it this way, imagine three men who go to war. One has an ordinary natural fear of danger that any man has, subdues it by moral efforts and becomes a brave man. Let us suppose that the other two have, as a result of things in their subconscious, exaggerated irrational fears, which no amount of moral efforts can do anything about. Now suppose that a psychoanalysis comes along and cures these two. That is, he puts them both back in the position of the first man. Well, it is just then that the psychoanalytical problem is over and the moral problems begin. Because now that they are cured, these two men might take quite different lines. The first might say, thank goodness I've got rid of all those doodahs. Now at last I can do what I always wanted to do, my duty to my country. But the other might say, well, I'm very glad that I now feel moderately cool under fire, but of course that doesn't alter the fact that I am still jolly well determined to look after number one and let the other chap do the dangerous job whenever I can. Indeed, one of the good things about feeling less frightening, is that I can now look after myself now much more efficiently, and can be more clever and at hiding the fact from the others. Now this difference is a purely moral one, and psychoanalysis cannot do anything about it. However much you improve the man's raw material, you have still got something else, the real free choice of a man. The material presented to him, either put it his own advantage first or to put it last. And this free choice is the only thing that morality is concerned with. The bad psychological material is not a sin, but a disease. It does not need to be repented of, but to be cured. And by the way, that is very important. Human beings judge one another by their external actions. God judges them by their moral choices. When a neurotic who has a pathological horror of cats forces himself to pick up a cat for some good reason, it is quite possible that in God's eyes he has shown more courage than a healthy man may have shown in winning the VC. When a man who has been perverted from his youth and taught that cruelty is the right thing, that some tiny little kindness or refrains from some cruelty he might have committed, and thereby perhaps risk being sneered at by his companions, he may in God's eyes be doing more than you and I would do if we gave up life itself for a friend. It is well to put this the other way around. Some of us who seem quite nice people may, in fact, have made so little use of good heredity and a good upbringing that we are really worse than those whom we regarded as fiends. Can we be quite certain how we should have behaved if we have been saddled with a psychological outfit, and then with a bad upbringing, and then with the power, say, of Himmler? That is why Christians are told not to judge. We see only the results which a man's choices make out of his raw material. But God does not judge him on the raw material at all, but on what he has done with it. Most of the man's psychological makeup is probably due to his body. When his body dies, all that will fall off him. And the real central man, the thing that chose, that made the best or the worst out of this material, will stand naked. All sorts of nice things which we thought our own, but which were really due to a good digestion, will fall off some of us. All sorts of nasty things which were due to complexes or bad health will fall off others. We shall then, for the first time, see everyone as he really was. There will be a surprise. There will be surprises. And that leads on to the second point. People often think of Christian morality as a kind of bargain in which God says, if you keep a lot of rules, I'll reward you. And if you don't, I'll do the other thing. I do not think that that is the best way to looking at it. I would much rather say that every time you make a choice, you are turning a central part of you, that part of you that chooses into something a little different from what it was before, and taking your life as a whole, which all your innumerable choices, all your life long, you are slowly turning this central thing either into a heavenly creature or into a hellish creature, either into the creature that is in harmony with God and with other creatures and with itself, or else into one that is in the state of war and hatred with God and with its fellow creatures, and with itself to be the one kind of creature is heaven. That is, it is joy and peace and knowledge and power. To be the other means madness, horror, idiocy, rage, impotence, and eternal loneliness. Each of us at each moment is progressing to the one state or the other. That explains that always used to puzzle me about Christian writers. They seem to be so very strict at one moment and so very free and easy at another. They talk about mere sins of thoughts as if they were immensely important, and then they talk about the most frightful murders and treacheries as if you had only got to repent and all would be forgiven. But I have come to see that they are right. What they are always thinking of is in the mark, which is the action leaves on that tiny central self, which no one sees in this life, but which each of us will have to endure or enjoy forever. One man may be so placed that his anger sheds the blood of thousands, and another so placed that however angry he gets, he will only be laughed at. But the little mark on the soul may be much the same in both. Each has done something to himself which, unless he repents, will make it harder for him to keep out the rage next time he is tempted, and will make the rage worse when he does fall into it. Each of them, if he seriously turns to God, can have that twist in the central man straightened out again. Each is, in the long run, doomed if he will not. The bigness or smallness of the thing seen from the outside is not what really matters. One last point. Remember that as I said, the right direction leads not only to peace but knowledge. When a man is getting better, he understands more and more clearly the evil that is still left in him. When a man is getting worse, he understands his own badness less and less. A moderately bad man knows he is not very good. A thoroughly bad man thinks he is all right. This is common sense, really. You understand sleep when you are awake, not while you are sleeping. You can see mistakes in arithmetic when your mind is working properly. While you are making them, you cannot see them. You can understand the nature of drunkenness when you are sober, not when you are drunk. Good people know about both good and evil. Bad people do not know about either. It's the end of chapter 4. So thank you guys so much for watching and being here with me. Please do not forget to subscribe, give me a thumbs up, share, comment, hit the bell for notifications, follow me on Instagram, and I will talk to you guys in my next